The Johnson family's living room glowed with warm Christmas lights. Red ribbons wrapped around the banister, stockings lined the fireplace, and the table was filled with roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce. Laughter floated around the room as cousins exchanged jokes, glasses clinked, and the sound of Christmas carols drifted softly in the background. Emily Johnson, quiet and reserved, sat near the end of the table. She had always been the family's silent dreamer, the one who filled notebooks instead of making noise. Beside her sat her older sister, Sarah Johnson, sharp-tongued and dramatic, the kind of person who loved the spotlight. Just as the family began passing dessert, Sarah stood up with a mischievous grin. In her hand, she held something small, leather-bound, and familiar. Emily's heart stopped. Sarah cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with exaggerated cheer, "our dear Emily has been hiding something. Let me entertain you with tonight's Christmas reading." She opened the diary. Emily's diary. Gasps fluttered through the room, followed by chuckles of curiosity. Emily's face went pale. Sarah began to read aloud passages, Emily's private confessions, dreams, and insecurities, words about loneliness, about not feeling good enough in this very family, about wishing for freedom from constant judgment. The room erupted in awkward laughter. Some cousins covered their mouths, others exchanged glances. An uncle tried to shush Sarah, but she continued, her voice rising like a performer on stage. "Listen to this one," Sarah mocked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Sometimes I think Sarah laughs at me because she's afraid of being forgotten." The family roared. Sarah laughed the loudest. Emily's chest tightened. Her throat ached, but she said nothing. She sat frozen, gripping the edge of her chair until her knuckles whitened. When Sarah finally tossed the diary onto the table, Emily stood silently. Without a word, she walked out of the room. The cold winter air outside stung her skin as she stepped onto the porch, but it felt less painful than the humiliation she had just endured. Behind her, Sarah's laughter still echoed like a cruel bell. But in Emily's eyes, a different fire had begun to burn. Quiet, hidden, unyielding. The night was still. Emily sat at her desk in her small apartment across town, Christmas lights glowing faintly outside her window. The leather diary, now back in her possession, lay unopened beside her laptop. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling not from shame, but from the surge of something deeper. Resolve. Most people thought her diary was just a collection of fragile confessions. What they didn't know was that those same pages had given birth to something extraordinary. Emily clicked on a hidden folder on her computer. Dozens of manuscript files appeared, each stamped with revisions, editor's notes, and publishing contracts. She scrolled through the emails, her inbox filled with messages from her literary agent Daniel Miller and congratulatory notes from publishers across New York. The world didn't know Emily Johnson. They knew her pen name, Evelyn Hart, the reclusive best-selling author whose novels topped the New York Times list for months. Her words had already been translated into 20 languages, her book signings filled with readers who cried, who thanked her for writing what they couldn't express. Her so-called embarrassing secrets weren't weakness. They were the raw material of her empire. Emily reached over and touched the stack of unopened fan letters piled on her desk, each one sealed with admiration and gratitude. She opened one at random. "Your book saved me," the letter read. "When I felt invisible, your words reminded me I mattered." Emily exhaled slowly, closing her eyes. Sarah thought she had won with her laughter. The family believed they had witnessed Emily's humiliation. But if only they knew. The very words Sarah mocked at Christmas dinner were the same words that had built Emily's invisible crown. Emily leaned back in her chair, a faint smile curving her lips. She didn't need to tell anyone the truth. Not yet. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Emily's apartment, illuminating the quiet luxury around her. It wasn't extravagant in the way Sarah might flaunt. It was elegant, purposeful. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with first editions and international translations of her own work, her pen name, Evelyn Hart, embossed in gold. On the oak desk next to her laptop sat a Crystal Award, National Book Award, 2022. Framed letters of appreciation hung nearby, one from a senator who quoted her novel in a speech, another from a high school teacher who said her books had inspired an entire generation of students. Emily sipped her coffee slowly, scrolling through her phone. Notifications flooded in, articles praising her storytelling, invitations to literary festivals in Paris, Tokyo, and Los Angeles. A headline flashed: Evelyn Hart's latest novel shatters sales records in first week. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. The world adored her words, even if her own family thought of her as invisible. She slipped on her coat and stepped outside. The doorman, Mr. Carter, greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Miss Johnson." She returned the smile but kept walking. Few people connected Emily Johnson, the quiet woman in jeans and a scarf, to Evelyn Hart, the literary icon. And that was exactly how she wanted it. As she walked down Fifth Avenue, she passed a bookstore. In the display window, stacked high like bricks of power, sat her latest book. A couple stood outside, pointing at it. "I heard she never does interviews," the man whispered. "Yeah," the woman replied. "But whoever Evelyn Hart is, she understands people in a way no one else does." Emily paused for just a second, her reflection caught in the glass beside the towering pile of books. To the world, she was untouchable, a mystery wrapped in ink. To her family, she was still the quiet girl whose diary was worth mocking. And that, she thought, was her greatest advantage. Back in the suburbs of Connecticut, the Johnson family gathered again a week after Christmas. Snow dusted the rooftops, and the living room still smelled faintly of pine. Conversation buzzed around leftover pies and half-finished gift wrap. It was Sarah who noticed first. A thick package had arrived in the mail for Emily, sleek, heavy, with the logo of a major publishing house printed in the corner. Emily accepted it quietly, thanked the courier, and slipped it into her bag without explanation. Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Since when do you get packages from New York publishers?" she asked, her tone laced with mockery. Emily shrugged. "Just books." She said nothing more. Later that evening, while Emily excused herself to take a phone call, Sarah caught a glimpse of the glossy book inside Emily's bag. It was brand new, still warm from the printer. On the cover, bold letters read, "By Evelyn Hart." Sarah froze for a second, recognition flickering across her face. She had seen that name on billboards, airport bookstores, even in her boss's office, but she brushed it off. No way. Emily? Impossible. Meanwhile, whispers had already started in the extended family group chat. "Did you see Emily's picture at that bookstore event?" a cousin typed. "Looks like her," another replied. "No, can't be. Emily doesn't even talk at dinner." Emily returned to the living room, her phone call finished. The room grew a little quieter as curious glances followed her. She ignored them, her expression calm, unreadable. Curiosity had been planted, and Sarah, though still dismissive, felt the first thread of unease. 2 weeks later, Emily sat at a quiet cafe in downtown Manhattan, a notebook open beside her latte. The January chill fogged the windows, but inside, the air buzzed with the low murmur of conversations. Across from her, a familiar face slid into the seat. Mark Reynolds, her cousin from Boston. He hadn't called ahead. He simply showed up, his grin too casual, his tone too forced. "Emily," he said, leaning forward. "Long time no see." Emily studied him carefully. Mark was always the opportunist, friendly on the surface, calculating underneath. He lowered his voice. So, I've been reading this book, Shadows Between Stars. Heard of it? Emily's pen stilled against the page. She knew the book well. It was her last release under Evelyn Hart. Mark chuckled, tapping the table nervously. Funny thing is, the way it's written, it felt familiar. Almost like I'd heard that voice before. His eyes narrowed slightly. Like I'd heard it at Christmas dinner, maybe? Emily didn't flinch. She took a sip of her coffee, her gaze steady. A lot of writers sound alike. Mark smirked, unconvinced. Sure, but the main character in that book? She has a sister who humiliates her in front of family. Sound familiar? The silence stretched. Emily leaned back, her voice calm but cool. If you're looking for gossip, Mark, you won't find it here. He laughed lightly, masking his frustration. Relax, Em. I'm just curious. If it were you, though, well, let's just say the family would be very interested. Emily closed her notebook, her patience thin. She spoke quietly, her words edged like steel. And that's exactly why they'll never know. Mark blinked, caught off guard by her firmness. He tried to grin it off, but for the first time, he realized Emily wasn't the fragile girl they once mocked. As he left the cafe, pulling his coat tighter against the wind, Emily sat perfectly still. If Mark had figured it out, it was only a matter of time before others did too. It was late January when the Johnson family gathered again, this time at their parents' house in Hartford. The living room was filled with the smell of roast chicken and cinnamon, the atmosphere warmer than the bitter cold outside. But beneath the chatter, an undercurrent of tension lingered. Sarah sat by the fireplace, her arms folded, eyes sharp. She had been restless since Christmas. Tonight, her curiosity had finally reached its breaking point. When Emily walked in, calm and composed, Sarah didn't wait. She stood abruptly, holding a paperback in her hand. It was Emily's book, Shadows Between Stars. So, Sarah said loudly, drawing everyone's attention. Care to explain why your diary entries just happened to be printed in this? The room fell silent. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all turned toward Emily. Her father, Michael Johnson, frowned in confusion. Her mother, Linda Johnson, shifted nervously. Emily's eyes flicked to the book in Sarah's hand, then back to her sister's face. She didn't answer. Sarah's voice rose, mocking yet desperate. Don't play innocent. I read those pages. I humiliated you with them. And now I find out you're… What? Evelyn Hart? Some big-shot author? Gasps rippled through the family. Mark, seated on the sofa, looked down awkwardly. He had clearly fueled this confrontation. Emily inhaled slowly. Her voice, when it came, was calm, steady. Yes, I am Evelyn Hart. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The silence broke into chaos. Relatives whispering, some shocked, some impressed, others greedy with sudden interest. Her mother's eyes welled with tears. Her father muttered, "All this time? Under our roof?" Sarah scoffed, masking her unease with anger. So what now? You think you're better than us because people read your sob stories? Emily's gaze hardened. I never wrote to be better than anyone. I wrote because it was the only way to survive voices like yours. The room stilled again. Emily picked up her coat from the arm of the chair, her movements deliberate, elegant. As she walked toward the door, Sarah shouted after her, "You can't just walk away from this conversation." Emily paused at the threshold, turning slightly. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room with finality. I already have. The door closed behind her with a quiet, powerful thud. Inside, Sarah's bravado cracked. For the first time, her laughter had no echo. The days after the confrontation grew heavy with noise. Emily's phone buzzed constantly, missed calls from her parents, voicemails from relatives she hadn't spoken to in years, and even emails from Sarah. At first, they were polite, laced with forced affection. Emily, sweetheart, we're so proud of you. Let's talk about how we can celebrate your success together. Then came the guilt. We're family, Em. You wouldn't even have those stories without us. You owe it to us to share. Finally, the manipulation turned sharp. Don't forget where you came from. Without us, you'd still be that shy little girl scribbling in her room. Sarah's messages were the worst. Dozens of texts, each dripping with desperation and envy. Everyone laughs about Christmas now, you know. I made you relevant. If it weren't for me, no one would even care about your words. Fine. If you don't acknowledge me, maybe the world should know the truth. Maybe I'll tell the press how you really stole my life and turned it into stories. Emily read them all in silence, her face unreadable. In her apartment, she sat by the window overlooking the snow-dusted city, the hum of life below reminding her of the world that existed beyond her family's smallness. She opened her diary again, its blank page glowing in the lamplight. Instead of anger, she felt a strange calm. She had built her world from pain before. She could withstand this storm too. For every voicemail, every message, every attempt to claw into her success, Emily answered with silence. And silence, she knew, was louder than any plea. It happened on a Thursday evening in Manhattan. Emily had been invited to a private gala hosted by Harper and Row, her publishers, at a glass-walled event space overlooking the city skyline. Inside, authors, editors, and critics mingled with champagne in hand, their conversations a blend of literature and ambition. Emily, elegant in a dark navy dress, stayed near the edge of the crowd. Her agent, Daniel Miller, introduced her discreetly to a few trusted figures, reminding everyone to respect the mystery of her pen name. To most of the guests, she was simply Evelyn Hart, the voice they admired but had never truly seen. And then, Sarah arrived. She stormed into the venue uninvited, her heels clacking against the marble floor, her eyes sharp with accusation. Behind her trailed Michael and Linda Johnson, wide-eyed and uneasy. The room quieted, whispers rising like smoke. "Emily Johnson!" Sarah's voice echoed, cutting through the music. Or should I say, Evelyn Hart? Gasps rippled across the crowd. Heads turned, phones lifted discreetly. Emily's breath steadied. She didn't flinch. Sarah marched forward, waving Emily's diary in her hand like a weapon. She built her career out of lies, out of my family's private life. You all worship her words, but they're nothing more than stolen confessions. Daniel stepped forward to intervene, but Emily raised her hand gently, stopping him. The entire room was watching. Emily walked toward her sister, her steps measured, her voice calm but commanding. "That diary you hold? Those pages you mocked in front of our family? They weren't your secrets, Sarah. They were mine. My pain. My voice. And I turned them into something greater than you could ever imagine." Sarah's face flushed crimson, her voice shrill. "You embarrassed me. You made me the villain in front of the world." Emily's gaze was steady, unyielding. "No, Sarah. You chose that role the moment you stood at Christmas dinner and laughed at what you didn't understand." The room was silent. The crowd of publishers and critics didn't see a humiliated girl anymore. They saw authority, an artist who had owned her truth. Sarah's voice cracked as she turned toward the audience, desperate. "You see? She doesn't care about family. She doesn't care about loyalty. She's selfish." But no one listened. The tide had turned. Eyes that once looked at Emily with curiosity now glowed with respect. Sarah's performance collapsed into bitter silence. Emily, without raising her voice, gave the final word. "Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. And tonight, you've proven you'll never understand that." With that, she turned her back on Sarah, her authority undeniable. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, deliberate, like a verdict being sealed. Sarah stood frozen, the diary limp in her hand. For the first time, she realized Emily didn't just survive her laughter. She had risen above it. The following week, Emily returned to her apartment, the city lights sparkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She didn't need to call, confront, or yell. Her moment had arrived quietly, with precision. On her desk lay a stack of printed proofs, her newest manuscript, fresh off the press. The dedication was subtle, almost hidden between paragraphs, yet pointed. To those who laughed at my diary, may you one day understand that words have power far greater than your amusement. She sent a copy to her publisher, Daniel Miller, who nodded approvingly. Simultaneously, a select few literary critics received advance copies, their reviews pre-scheduled for maximum impact. By morning, the dedication would be everywhere. And for Sarah? Emily ensured she received a personal copy, couriered discreetly with tracking. No fanfare, no confrontation, just the words waiting on the first page for her to open. That evening, Emily's phone lit up with news alerts. Evelyn Hart's new novel tops global bestseller charts within 24 hours. Social media buzzed with praise, interviews, and discussions. Sarah saw the delivery and opened it, her eyes scanning the dedication. Her face paled. In one quiet stroke, Emily had turned the mockery from Christmas into worldwide recognition. Family group chats erupted with comments. "Did you see her dedication?" She called us out. Subtly, but brilliantly. Emily Johnson equals genius. No one needed to confront her again. The world had seen the proof. Emily, sipping her tea by the window, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't begged for recognition. Her silent strategy had done all the work. The laughter that once humiliated her had been transformed. Now it underscored her triumph. Emily leaned back, gazing at the city, thinking, I didn't need revenge. I needed them to witness the power of my words. And they had. Snowflakes drifted lazily outside Emily's apartment window. The city hummed quietly below, indifferent to the turmoil that had once consumed her life. Emily sat in her favorite armchair, a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands. The diary lay beside her, closed but sacred, a symbol of the journey that had shaped her. She reflected on the laughter that had once stung so sharply at Christmas dinner. That laughter had seemed cruel, but it had been the spark that drove her forward. Every word she wrote, every story she published, every quiet triumph had grown from that moment of humiliation. Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, each one a reminder of unseen observers, readers whose lives she had touched, whose hearts she had reached. Emily smiled softly, her pen poised above the next blank page. There were more stories to tell, more worlds to create, more truths to unfold. And somewhere, far away, Sarah would open a book and read her words again, this time powerless to mock. Emily whispered to herself, calm and certain. She read my diary at Christmas to humiliate me, but today, the world reads it to remember me. The pen met paper. The city shimmered below. Peace, at last, had been written.